The reason you can't leave him, it's not love. You already know the relationship hurts you. You know the anxiety is destroying your peace. You know the emotional exhaustion is getting worse. You know you've cried over the same pain too many times. You know you keep feeling disappointed, emotionally drained, confused, and mentally overwhelmed. So why can't you leave? Why do you still miss someone who keeps hurting you emotionally? Why do you keep going back after promising yourself this time would be different? That question destroys so many people internally. Because eventually the pain becomes mixed with shame. You start thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I still attached? Why can't I let go even when I know this relationship is unhealthy? And maybe the hardest part is this. A part of you has already left mentally, but emotionally, you still feel trapped. You try to distance yourself, but the moment they become affectionate again, everything inside you shifts. The hope returns. The craving returns. The emotional attachment returns. That's why some of the hardest relationships to leave are the ones destroying you emotionally. Because what keeps people trapped is not always love. Sometimes it's emotional dependency. Sometimes it's trauma bonding. Sometimes it's the psychological addiction created by pain followed by relief. And until you understand that, you will continue blaming yourself for something your nervous system became emotionally conditioned to need. Today, you're going to understand the real psychological reason you can't let go, and why it has far less to do with love than you think. One of the biggest emotional illusions in toxic relationships is believing you're still fighting for love. But many times, what you're actually fighting for is relief. Relief from the anxiety. Relief from the distance. Relief from the emotional pain the relationship itself created. And that changes everything. Because when the relationship becomes emotionally unstable, your nervous system starts living in tension. You feel uncertain, emotionally disconnected, afraid of abandonment, desperate for reassurance. Then suddenly, the person becomes affectionate again. They text you lovingly. They apologize. They become emotionally warm for a moment. And instantly, your body relaxes. Your mind calms down. The emotional pain temporarily disappears. That relief feels powerful, almost addictive. And over time, your brain starts associating that person with emotional relief instead of emotional peace. That's why leaving feels so difficult. Because you're no longer only attached to the person. You're attached to the emotional release that comes after suffering. You're not chasing love anymore. You're chasing emotional relief from the pain the relationship itself created. And that cycle becomes psychologically consuming. Pain, relief, pain, reassurance, pain, affection. The emotional contrast intensifies the attachment. Because the human brain is not designed to crave stability after emotional conditioning like this. It starts craving the moments that temporarily remove the emotional suffering. And the dangerous part is this. Those moments begin to feel like proof that the relationship still has hope. When in reality, they may simply be part of the cycle keeping you emotionally attached. One of the most confusing parts of emotionally unhealthy relationships is how intense they feel. Sometimes they feel more passionate, more emotional, more consuming than healthy relationships ever did. And because of that, people assume this must be real love. But emotional intensity and emotional health are not the same thing. In fact, toxic relationships often feel stronger precisely because they are emotionally unstable. The unpredictability creates obsession. You never fully know when affection will come back, when the person will become warm again, when the emotional connection will return. And that uncertainty keeps your brain emotionally hyper-focused on the relationship. Healthy love feels different. Healthy love feels stable, consistent, emotionally safe. But when someone becomes emotionally conditioned to chaos, peace can start feeling unfamiliar, even boring. That's one of the biggest psychological traps. The brain often mistakes emotional intensity for emotional importance. And emotionally toxic relationships create constant highs and lows. Pain followed by affection, distance followed by closeness, fear followed by relief. That emotional contrast produces powerful chemical reactions inside the brain. Dopamine, cortisol, adrenaline. The nervous system becomes emotionally activated all the time. That activation gets confused with passion, but real love should not constantly destabilize your emotional world. Love should not make your nervous system feel trapped between anxiety and relief. And maybe that's why healthy relationships feel strange to some people at first. Because when your brain becomes used to emotional chaos, calmness no longer feels emotionally familiar. Most people think they stay because they're afraid of losing the person, but many times, that's not the deepest fear at all. The real fear is what leaving would force them to feel emotionally. The emptiness, the withdrawal, the silence after emotional dependency. The terrifying feeling of no longer having the person their nervous system became attached to. Because after a while, the relationship stops being just a relationship. It becomes emotional structure. Your routines, your thoughts, your emotional state, your sense of identity, everything slowly starts revolving around the connection. Even when the relationship hurts, it still becomes emotionally familiar. And human beings often cling to familiar pain more easily than unfamiliar freedom. That's why leaving can feel emotionally unbearable. Not because the relationship was healthy, but because your emotional system became organized around it. Sometimes people stay because the relationship became emotionally painful, but leaving feels emotionally terrifying. And maybe that explains something you've struggled to understand for a long time: why your mind knows the relationship is hurting you, but your emotions still panic at the idea of losing it. Because emotional dependency creates a psychological contradiction. The person becomes both the source of pain and the emotional escape from that pain. So when distance happens, your nervous system reacts almost like withdrawal, restlessness, obsessive thinking, craving reassurance, emotional panic. Not because you're weak, but because attachment mixed with fear changes the way the brain experiences emotional separation. After enough emotional conditioning, the relationship stops feeling like a choice emotionally. It starts feeling like survival. And that's one of the most dangerous parts of trauma bonding, because your nervous system slowly begins treating that person as if your emotional stability depends on them. Their attention affects your mood. Their distance affects your anxiety. Their approval affects your self-worth. Their affection temporarily calms your emotional pain. And without realizing it, your entire emotional system becomes connected to their behavior. That's why emotionally unhealthy relationships can feel physically consuming. Your body reacts to the instability. You lose sleep, you overthink constantly. You check your phone obsessively. You feel emotional panic during distance and emotional relief during reconnection. Your nervous system becomes dysregulated, and eventually, emotional attachment turns into emotional craving. The same person causing your emotional pain becomes the person your brain believes can relieve it. That sentence explains trauma bonding more clearly than most people realize. Because after repeated emotional highs and lows, your brain stops seeking peace. It starts seeking emotional regulation through the relationship itself. And that creates something extremely powerful: emotional dependency mixed with survival fear. That's why even after painful arguments, emotional neglect, or repeated disappointment, people still feel drawn back emotionally. Not because the relationship feels healthy, but because the nervous system became conditioned to believe, I need this person to feel emotionally okay again. And until someone understands that psychological cycle, they often continue blaming themselves for not being strong enough to walk away. One of the reasons it feels so difficult to let go is because your mind keeps returning to the good moments, the beginning, the connection, the affection. The version of the relationship that once made you feel deeply loved, emotionally chosen, and hopeful. And because those memories feel so emotionally powerful, part of you keeps believing, maybe we can get back to that again. That hope becomes emotionally addictive. Even when the present reality keeps hurting you, your mind emotionally clings to the possibility of what the relationship could become, not necessarily what it is now. That's why people often stay emotionally attached to potential instead of reality. You're grieving the version of the relationship you keep hoping will return, and the brain strengthens that attachment through selective emotional memory. During emotional pain, the mind naturally searches for moments of relief. So instead of focusing only on the suffering, it keeps replaying the affection, the intimacy, the rare moments where everything felt emotionally safe again. Those memories create emotional confusion, because part of you remembers how painful the relationship feels, while another part remembers how beautiful it once seemed. And when someone is emotionally attached, nostalgia becomes incredibly powerful. You begin comparing the current pain to the emotional highs of the past instead of comparing the relationship to what healthy love should actually feel like. That's why toxic relationships often survive through memory and hope long after emotional safety has disappeared. Because emotionally, the person is not only attached to who the relationship is now, they are attached to who they still desperately hope it could become. There comes a point in emotionally addictive relationships where the damage stops feeling temporary. You begin noticing changes inside yourself that were never there before. You overthink constantly. You feel emotionally exhausted all the time. You become anxious over small things. You need reassurance more often. You feel emotionally unstable depending on how the other person behaves. And slowly, your sense of self starts disappearing inside the relationship. That's what emotional dependency does. It shifts your emotional center away from yourself and places it inside another person's approval, attention, and emotional availability. Your mood depends on them. Your peace depends on them. Your emotional stability depends on them. And eventually, you stop recognizing who you used to be before the relationship consumed so much of your emotional energy. You become emotionally hyper-focused on the connection, trying to fix it, trying to understand it, trying to hold on to it. Even while it continues draining you psychologically, and the frightening part is that this process happens slowly enough that many people don't realize how emotionally dependent they've become until they feel incapable of functioning emotionally without the relationship. When was the last time you felt emotionally safe without needing reassurance from them? That question is painful because it reveals something important. At some point, the relationship stopped being about connection and started becoming emotional survival. And once someone reaches that point, leaving no longer feels like losing a relationship, it feels like losing emotional stability itself. One of the most damaging things people say to someone trapped in an emotionally addictive relationship is, just leave. As if emotional attachment were purely logical. As if someone could simply turn off emotional conditioning because they finally understand the relationship is unhealthy. But trauma bonds do not operate through logic alone. They operate through emotional survival patterns, nervous system conditioning, and psychological dependency. That's why people often feel ashamed of staying, even while suffering deeply. They start blaming themselves. Why am I still here? Why can't I move on? What's wrong with me? But emotional addiction cannot be broken through logic alone. Because the attachment is no longer only emotional. It becomes neurological. Your brain starts associating the relationship with relief, attachment, validation, and emotional regulation. Even when the relationship creates pain, your nervous system still believes reconnection will remove the suffering temporarily. And shame makes the cycle even stronger. Because the more someone judges themselves for staying, the weaker and more trapped they begin to feel emotionally. People don't stay because they enjoy suffering. They stay because emotional attachment rewires fear, hope, and survival together. That's why healing begins with understanding the cycle instead of condemning yourself for being trapped inside it. Because self-hatred will never create emotional freedom. Awareness will. And maybe the first step toward leaving emotionally is realizing you were never weak for struggling to let go of something your nervous system became psychologically attached to. At some point, something inside you begins to wake up. A quiet realization that love should not feel this emotionally painful all the time. Because healthy love does not constantly throw your nervous system into anxiety, fear, and emotional withdrawal. Healthy love creates stability, consistency, emotional safety. But when someone becomes emotionally dependent on a toxic relationship, peace starts feeling unfamiliar. Calmness feels empty. Emotional stability feels strange because the brain became conditioned to chaos, unpredictability, and emotional craving. That's why many people confuse emotional withdrawal with love. They think the desperation, obsession, and emotional panic mean the connection must be deep. But real love should not make your emotional stability collapse every time someone becomes distant. If someone's absence destroys your emotional stability, that may not be love. That may be emotional dependency. That sentence changes the way many people finally understand their relationships. Because emotional dependency convinces people they cannot emotionally survive without the connection. But the truth is this: what feels unbearable is often not the loss of love itself. It's the withdrawal from the emotional cycle your nervous system became attached to. And the moment you begin understanding that difference, something powerful starts happening. You stop romanticizing emotional suffering. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. You stop believing emotional pain automatically means emotional depth. And slowly, you begin realizing that healthy love should feel emotionally safe, not emotionally consuming. You are not weak for struggling to leave someone your nervous system became emotionally attached to. And maybe that is the most important thing you need to hear after everything we talked about today. Because people trapped in emotionally addictive relationships often spend years blaming themselves for staying. They call themselves weak, dependent, broken. But emotional addiction is real. Trauma bonding is real. And when pain, hope, fear, and emotional relief become psychologically connected inside the brain, leaving stops feeling simple. That does not mean the relationship is healthy. It means your emotional system became conditioned to survive inside instability. But awareness changes everything, because the moment you finally understand the cycle, you stop romanticizing it. You begin seeing the emotional pattern for what it truly is. Not destiny, not soulmate connection, not proof that you can't live without them, but emotional conditioning that slowly disconnected you from yourself. And the beautiful thing is this: what was conditioned can heal. Your nervous system can heal. Your emotional identity can return. Your peace can return. And one day, you may look back and realize that the relationship you thought you couldn't survive without was actually the relationship preventing you from emotionally surviving fully. Healing starts the moment you stop blaming yourself for the attachment and start understanding the psychological cycle behind it. Because freedom becomes possible the moment clarity returns.